Welcome back to the Library of Awakening. Today, we're exploring an interesting and historical work titled Astrology, Its Technics and Ethics by C.A.Q. Libra. In this book, the author attempts to make the study of astrology easier to understand by simplifying the technical language and calculations that often discourage beginners. Rather than presenting astrology as something mysterious or requiring blind belief, the author suggests that it is a subject that can be explored through observation, research, and personal study, especially through the examination of one's own birth chart. The book also explores how astrology has been studied across many civilizations, from the Chaldeans and Egyptians to Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato. It presents astrology as part of a broader tradition of occult sciences that sought to understand humanity's relationship with the greater cosmos. Before we begin, it's important to remember that the ideas expressed in this book belong to the author. Here at the Library of Awakening, our purpose is simply to read and explore historical and philosophical works. We always encourage you to continue your own research, think critically, and form your own conclusions. If you enjoy these readings and want to help this platform grow organically, please consider hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing to the Library of Awakening. Now, let's begin. Many of those who take up the study of astrology complain of the great obscurity of the books of study, of the many technical terms, incomprehensible to the laity, and especially of the difficulties of the calculations, which latter are unsurmountable for those who have no knowledge of mathematics and cosmology. I will, therefore, try to remove these obstacles by using foreign names as little as possible, and by simplifying the calculations in such a manner that anyone of average intellect and with a knowledge of ordinary arithmetic may be able to follow this study without much difficulty. Further, I will try to be as brief and clear as possible, omitting all superfluous digressions, and yet giving a fairly complete survey of that branch of astrology which is called genethliacal astrology, that which applies to nativity or birth. This branch is by far the most important, and therefore counts most students. Astrology has the advantage over other occult sciences in that it asks no belief of the student, but only investigation. Anyone who takes up the study of his own birth horoscope with some assiduity will be able to demonstrate, by numerous facts, looked up by himself, that astrology is true, is founded on facts in nature. To this end, it is positively necessary to know the exact time of one's birth, and as, for the last half-century, the hour of birth had to be filled in at the registry, one might go there for inquiry. Next, you will have to obtain an ephemeris for the year in which you were born. You may then cast your own horoscope and study it. You will find how extremely interesting this study is. Those who know by research and experience how much our life, our doings and dealings, our moods, in fact, all that happens in the world, is influenced by the powers that work in the cosmos, often wonder how it is possible that a science such as astrology, which comprises the study of those cosmic powers, has relatively so few students and so many opponents. It is strange, for it is easy to show the truth of astrology practically to anyone who wishes it. One reason of astrology being discredited is surely to be found in the rubbish brought into the market under the name of astrology and planet law, but having nothing whatever to do with it in reality. In every branch of science, however, fraud and charlatanism are to be found, but the principal causes are the dogmatism of modern religions and the rapid development during the last centuries of materialism, which has brought man to accept only that which he can observe with his three-dimensional senses and explain through well-known physical laws, regardless of the cause, the foundation of these phenomena. We need not accept anything supernatural in astrology. According to this doctrine, also, everything happens along natural and unchangeable laws. But also, it teaches us that in the universe, laws operate of which we still know very little. We see them in their outward results, but so far, we can only guess how they work. For this reason, astrology is, for the greater part, an empirical science, It is founded on observations which have been made for centuries. Astrology begins to gradually draw the attention of the public of late. In the United States, there is already a University of Astrology where one may graduate in this science, and the time is coming when the elements of astrology will be taught in schools as a part of cosmology. And for England as well, that time will come, however conservative the English may be. Is it not far more useful for a child to understand something of life in the cosmos than to be able to give the exact date of the settling of Flemish weavers in Pembrokeshire, to know on which day, for the first time, the eldest son of the English sovereign was called Prince of Wales? What greater part astrology might play in the sphere of education, in self-education, as well as in the hands of parents and teachers. By going carefully through the children's horoscopes, they would get to understand their pupils better and realize that under certain planetary influences, they could scarcely help acting in an unusual manner, and thus, many an unjustly inflicted punishment will be left aside. Every child bears at his birth his own characteristics in him, and these will never change. They are inseparable of his individuality, and this the pedagogue has to take into account. If he wants to make of a child what can be made of him, and for this, accurate knowledge of his characteristics and talents, on which his horoscope throws light, must show the way. As things often are now, failures are made of them. Ignorant of the laws, they try to lead the child in a direction not meant for him, and the natural talent gets suffocated. Yet, it will assert itself later, but only after much disappointment and failure. The material sciences, however far advanced, are still far from being complete, and moreover, deal with the outer side only. To the foundation of things, the real, 'cause they do no penetrate, and they are not as yet sufficiently advanced to set themselves with some ground up as competent judges of the occult sciences. We may respect the great progress of the material sciences and apply ourselves to them with the greatest interest, if we still bear in mind that they are far from being omniscient, and that to a high degree it is narrow and conceited, and in the true sense of the word, unscientific, that a great thinker, like, for example, Haeckel, the German Darwin, puts his professorial veto on theological, cosmological, teleological, and ethnological proofs of immortality. Not everything can be reduced to a palpable scientific ground. Though the astrological influences do not fall beyond the sphere of natural laws, they do fall beyond the circle in which our sciences of nature move, and therefore material scientists are incompetent to put their veto on them. How often are the material scientists compelled to change their theories and hypotheses in order to accept in the end that which, centuries ago, was acknowledged to be true by the occult science? We need only point to the atom theory, which has been altered repeatedly, and the theory of vibrations. And likewise, it will happen with chemistry. The great number of elements will melt together into the one element that occultism has, and of which the other elements are only vibration proportions. Occult science has always been some centuries in advance of the material sciences. It is the mother of those sciences, and the mother of religions as well, for it contains the esoteric, the inner side of all religions, and astrology is a part of the occult sciences. All religions are based on the esoteric doctrine and are the different, outer, exoteric expressions of it. However much they differ, they are all necessary, for all men have not evolved in the same direction. Each differs in his conception of truth. His present conception serves him as long as it is needful to his evolution. After that he searches, guided by intuition in another direction. Change of conception in religion should not always be ascribed to inconstancy. It is often the consequence of moral and intellectual growth. All religions are views upon the great castle of truth, seen from different angles and through a more or less dense veil of dust. All reveal to us one side of the universal truth, but in proportion to the veil, more or less hazy and twisted. They are all, however, useful and needful to their followers. The occult sciences, which give us the key to many mysteries of life and evolution, were wrapped in a shape, comprehensible to initiates only, and this is to a sense the case with our Bible as well. This is not only for the reason that humanity as a whole was not yet ripe to understand the truths which they contain, but also because the initiates were officially forbidden to speak of them during the long time of persecutions to which they were exposed. So they kept their wisdom for humanity in this way. It will not be superfluous to begin with a few historical notes in order to show how, through all times, there have been eminent men whose names sound throughout the ages, who believed in astrology and devoted their lives to this study. We will not give long lists of famous Arabian, Chaldean, and Egyptian astrologers, seeing these do not mean much to the majority of people. We will only mention the names of El-Battani and About Wefa, who compiled tables for calculating the tangents and cotangents. The Arabian astrologers seem to have been the first that used the sinus in their calculations. Astronomer, astrologer, and mathematician were at that time united in one person. The first written scientific works on astrology are by Claudius Ptolemy. He wrote in the year 126 A.D. his well-known 4 books on the influence of the stars. The books are called the Tetrabiblos, or Quadripartite. The 3rd and 4th book contain the study of births. Ptolemy was a follower of the Alexandrian school. He was highly celebrated during the reign of Adrian and Antony Pius. He corrected the existing tables of the fixed stars and drew up new tables for the movement of sun, moon, and planets. 13 books contain the famous Ptolemaic system. He seems to have founded his system of astrology, which the Tetrabiblos contain, on the books of Hermes, the first great Egyptian astrologer who lived before Moses. In Persia, there lived, during Darius Hystaspes' reign, the astrologer Gamasp, surnamed Al-Hakim, the Wise One. He was the counselor and friend of the king, and of him it is told that by astrological calculations he predicted the coming of Jesus and of Mahomet. He also predicted that the religion of the Persians, which was based on magic, was doomed. In India, China, and Egypt, later on in the south of Europe as well, astrology was highly renowned. Of the Greek astrologers, we need only mention the names of Anaximandre, Anaxagoras, and later Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Proclus. A saying of Hippocrates is a portento, that the man who is ignorant of the science of astrology deserves the name of fool rather than that of physician. The astrologer Nigidius Figulus, friend to Cicero, predicted at Octavius's birth that the latter should become ruler of the world. We know that the ancient Persians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and ancient Egyptians studied astrology, and that they performed their deeds of some importance, at times indicated by astrological calculations to be the most favourable. History shows us how great a power the priest astrologers obtained by this knowledge. Even monarchs felt dependent on them. Would this have been possible if their prophecies had not proved irrevocably true, if their knowledge were only show and their predictions fraud? Reason answers this question decidedly in the negative. These priests had moreover great astronomical knowledge. A proof of this may serve the calculation of the regularly recurring eclipse of the sun and moon are still made by means of the Chaldean Zaros. Our present-day astronomers could not correct this formula. It was chiefly the Arabians who brought astrology to the West, though it is probable that long before that time, Egyptian astrologers introduced it in Europe. The Egyptian astrologers were the trusted counselors and wens of the reigning kings. It was, in fact, they who ruled. The ancient Jewish books, the Kabbalah, and the Talmud are altogether based on astrological principles. Here, a great part is played, especially by the value of numbers of the planets and of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Of the books of the Kabbalah, it is especially the famous Zohar, which preaches a wonderful philosophy of life in the cosmos, compared to and connected with that of man. Andrei Niemojevsky says, "The great book of Revelation, which that illumined soul read, was the heavens. The stars were letter types, the words constellations, and the chapters astral periods. And one reads there that humanity shaped its earthly order after the great timepiece of the world, and modelled and corrected its philosophy, its ethics, its social ideas, after it. In Pythagoras' school, the knowledge of mathematics and astrology were compulsory, the latter especially being studied in connection with sound and number. All old occult manuscripts, among which our Bible may be numbered, are full of astrology. And if Moses forbade the study of astrology, it was most probably only by reason of the unscientific way in which it was studied. It was much more difficult in those days for one to make use of astrological tables, education not being so common as today. Hence, there was as much deception and pretense to fortune-telling as today. Nay, more so, as the age was a far more ignorant and superstitious one. It was this abuse and charlatanism which Moses forbade. The astrologers, Thrasyllus, father and son, were the counselors of Tiberius and Nero. Of the father, a peculiar anecdote is known, mentioned by Tacitus and Plutarch. Thrasyllus knew too much of the secret thoughts and plans of the Emperor Tiberius, and the latter tried to get rid of him. He took him a walk on a high wall with the purpose of throwing him off, and he asked Thrasyllus if he knew everything concerning himself. Yes, was the answer. I know that I am in great danger of life, but your majesty as well, for I know also that you will outlive me only by 24 hours. The emperor, who had an implicit belief in Thrasyllus, did not carry out his intention. Thrasyllus the son predicted Nero's future imperial dignity. M. Champollion found in one of the Ramses tombs, dating of the 19th and 20th dynasty, 14001-133b. C. An astrological table of houses, which clearly indicates the accuracy of their calculations. They knew the relation between the 12 signs of the zodiac and the several parts of the human body. The British Museum contains a number of horoscopes, written on papyrus. The Egyptians made their predictions, chiefly according to the so-called secondary or moon directions. Plato, Socrates' pupil, studied the influence of sun and moon on the formation of both sexes. Heraclitus, a pupil of Plato and Aristotle, wrote a treatise on the high leg in the horoscope and on the influence of the sun as life-giver. Europe received its civilization from the East, and also the science of astrology, as we already saw. From Greece and Italy, it penetrated into the other countries of Europe. One of the best-known Christian astrologers is Paul the Philosopher, 850. Among the popes, we find several students of astrology. For example, Pope Sylvester, 9921002, Pope John XX, and John XXI were keen astrologers. Thomas Aquinas says, "The celestial bodies are the cause of all that takes place in this sub-lunar world. They influence the human actions directly, but not every action caused by them is inevitable." Summa, Quaest 15, Art. Further, the famous Albertus Magnus, bishop and architect, who wrote a symbol system which is held in high honour with Freemasons, he says, "All that nature and art produces is driven by celestial powers. The signs in the sky and the celestial bodies existed before all other created things, and therefore influence all that came into existence after them, etc." We may mention Roger Bacon, Guido Bonatti, court astrologer to Frederick II, and Petri Abano, or Francisco della Stabili, friend to Dante, John de Luna, Cardinal Peter Daly. Dante, whose words, "Only follow your star, the haven of glory awaits you," are well known. In another passage he says, "Astrology is the most sublime, the noblest science, without any faults. Giordano, Bruno, Rusbrock, Jacob Boehme and Spinoza believed in astrology." Further, Hieronymus de Manfredi, professor of medicine at the University of Bologna, 1460, who combined astrology and medicine. Johann Stoffler, professor of mathematics at Tübingen, computed the exact date of his death, which was to take place by an accident. By inviting friends and staying quietly at home, he tried to evade the possibility of an accident. In a dispute, however, wishing to prove his arguments, he went to a high bookshelf to seize a folio volume. He fell and got a deadly wound. We may mention the names of Melanchthon and Johann Miller. The former wrote a preface to a work of the astrologer Schones, and delivered lectures on astrology. Tycho de Brake, 1546-1601, tried to raise astrology to a religion. He says, "The stars rule the lot of man, but God rules the stars." He was, however, not blind to the abuse made of astrology. Paracelsus studied especially the influence of the planets on the vegetable and mineral kingdom, and discovered a large number of medicines. By comparing the microcosmos man to the macrocosmos, our solar system, led by logic and intuition, Kepler, the famous astronomer, was an astrologer as well. It is universally known how he predicted to Wallenstein, at that time young and unknown, his future glory. He predicted several details concerning his career, the enemies he would make, his eagerness for fame and glory, his marriage and financial circumstances, and the exact day of Wallenstein's death. Of William Lilly, the well-known London astrologer, it is known that he foretold the Great London Fire in 1666. His astrological works are still being studied. Pico de Mirandola, a fierce opponent of astrology, gave at his death the most striking proof of the truth of astrology, for he died at the exact hour that the astrologers had predicted. Dr. John Butler, another opponent of astrology, who in order to be able to oppose it with more success and to show its weak points, took up the study of astrology, changed tactics after that study, viz. Instead of attacking astrology, as he originally intended to, he wrote a book to show the truth of astrology. Professor Max Mueller once said that many of our greatest men of intellect studied astrology, but that the majority of them never expressed their opinion on that point for fear of being ranked with the quacks in this line, the so-called astrologers and the fortune-tellers. Francis Bacon, Baron of Verulam, one of the greatest minds of his time, believed in planetary influences, just like Isaac Newton, the great researcher and thinker. He defended astrology against the astronomer Halley by saying, "I have studied the subject, Mr. Halley. You have not." Newton never expressed his opinion on things he was not certain about. His great caution in this direction is as well known as his enormous scientific merits. Of the German astrologers, we may mention J.W. Pfaff. He vehemently protested against the neglect of astrology and wrote a treatise on Napoleon's death, which was to coincide with a conjunction of Mars and Saturn, May 5th, 1821. Leibniz studied astrology and believed in it, that Goethe, Shakespeare, and also, for example, Sir Walter Scott believed in astrology is not to be doubted. Valentin Wigelius, in his Astrology Theologized, 1649, calls astrology the light of nature. It comprises everything, all sciences, arts, branches of knowledge, qualities and conditions of body and spirit, and further, all conditions and occurrences in the universe. Everything takes its origin in the planets, and according to our using or abusing the influences, we feel them to be good or bad. He says that astrology and religion ought to go hand in hand, and that the study of the macrocosmos, the universe, as well as of the microcosmos man, is meant by it. What is outside us, in our surroundings, is also in us, and the expression, "a wise man rules his stars," does not allude to the stars in the macrocosmos, but to those in the microcosmos. The sky of the macrocosmos, with its perpetual revolution, corresponds exactly to the inward sky of the microcosmos. The last is, as it were, a microscopic reflection of the first in all its changes as well. It would be easy to enrich this list with a large number of names of enlightened thinkers who all studied astrology, but for my purpose, the above-mentioned names will suffice. Is it astonishing that he who has fixed his opinion by more or less thorough study and research compares the general public to a colour-blind man who is positive that red and green are the self-same colour? Those who ignore the influence of the planets without proceeding thorough research are simply guilty of pedantry, seeing that they prefer their immature, rash judgment, founded on tradition only, to that of great thinkers, who throughout all ages have devoted their lives to the inquiry after the effect of powers of nature, little known as yet. We say once more, investigate, and you will find the truth of it affirmed in your own life. It would be highly interesting to collect particulars at the registrars of people who were born at exactly the same time and the same place. If the data of births were correct, one would find that such lives were remarkable in their similarity. In history, several cases of this kind are known, among which, following characteristic example, in a paper of 1820 is mentioned the death of Samuel Hennings, who was born on June 4th, 1738, at the same moment as King George, H.I., and at the same place, St. Martin. He came into business in October 1760, when George III mounted the throne. He was married on September 8th, 1761, just like King George. And after both lives had gone quite parallel, both died on January 29th, 1820, at the same hour. They had the same number of children, of the same sex. Of these two laws, which, according to Theosophy, rule the universe, and therefore man, a brief explanation is desirable. We give in a few words the leading idea of these two laws, because they spread some light on the cause and the substance of the planetary influences. For the study of astrology, it is absolutely unnecessary that one believes in reincarnation. Astrology needs no foundation of belief. Astrology only asks thorough inquiry, and this is inevitably followed by believing, knowing. I know a number of men who do not believe in reincarnation, yet, nevertheless, are convinced astrologers, though, in my opinion, they will, after continued study, acknowledge both these laws. The law of karma L is not likely to be a stumbling block to anyone. What rational being does not accept the inexorable law of cause and effect? We see the proofs of it daily, round us. Reincarnation is difficult to prove. One can become convinced of the truth of this law by logical reasoning only. For what somebody else thinks to have seen or experienced of former lives is no proof for us personally. The law of karma, or of cause and effect, teaches that every action, every thought, carries its inexorable consequence with it, and for man, this consequence, this reaction, can be shown in the present or in a following earthly existence. So he creates, in his present life, the condition of the future, and the conditions of the present are the product of his actions in former earthly lives. Man, the individual soul, the ego is, after a certain period, born anew in a material body, which latter serves him as an instrument for observation and action, to have experiences which he cannot learn on the higher astral and mental planes. This being born again ought not to be mixed up with transmigration of souls, of which is said that a human soul can pass into a lower creature. There is no regression, but continuous evolution. We see this everywhere in nature. Man is born as man, and remains man, though in his former periods of evolution, he had to go through the mineral, plant, and animal condition, which does not mean that he was a mineral, a plant, or an animal. There are higher, no lower conditions to be reached by him, except in very rare cases. We must go along with the current of universal evolution on Earth, and we can only delay our own evolution in spiritual and moral sense by our thoughts and actions, but check it. We cannot. We shall see presently how we, by means of astrology, become able to take our evolution in hand, so that we, instead of being stragglers, get more and more in the front rows. Every man has several weak points in his character, and he feels intuitively that it is his moral duty to take up the hatchet against these faults, which, as occultism teaches, began for the greater part in former incarnations, when he knew less of the cosmic laws than now. However low man may be morally, there is something in him which tells him what is good or bad, however much the conceptions of good and bad may differ with the many races and nations. For until man attains perfection, these conceptions are only relative. His standpoint in evolution points out to him the correct place where he has to be, and that standpoint, combined with the good and bad consequences created in former lives, determine his place and rule of conduct in this incarnation. We usually speak of good and bad karma, though the terms harmonious and inharmonious karma would be better. There can be no question of bad, because aim and final result are harmony. So at a certain time, man becomes conscious of his duty to try and conquer his lower nature with all its faults and bad habits, until he no longer is the slave, but becomes the master. According to his success in this, he not only becomes gradually the ruler of his own destiny, but also, in time, he obtains the mastery of the mineral, vegetable and animal kingdom, and of the forces of nature which play a part in them. But in order to become the master of nature, he must first have conquered himself. That is to say, he must be able to look upon his lower nature, the non-self, unselfishly as that which is transitory, and so subservient to the higher self, which is constant, universal, the ego. This is the final purpose of our earth evolution, and whether we want or not, we must go along with this earthly growth. As we have seen, we can cooperate and oppose. In the first case, we bring ourselves in harmony with the cosmos, that is to say, the source of all life. In the last, we shut this source off to ourselves, and that means disharmony in the functions of our physical body, disturbances in our thinking, feeling, and will, and at length, it means the death of our physical instrument, our material body. With the death of the material body, man is deprived of the organs of observation and action on the physical plane, and so this matter disappears from his sphere of observation. He wakes in a world previously invisible to him, the astral world, which permeates the material world. The astral world, therefore, is in the same place, but invisible to the organs of his material body. He dwells now in the astral or emotional body, with astral organs, for observation. He already possessed this astral body during his earthly existence, but he could not then consciously make use of it, because the material body thwarted him. The duration of his abode in the astral world, with its various spheres, is determined by the moral standpoint which he occupied during his physical existence, and, at the end of it, he also dies on this plane, and he becomes conscious on the mental plane, which permeates both the astral and the physical sphere, and so is in the same place. His body, or vehicle, is here, the mental body, which was already present during his earthly and astral life, but undeveloped. In this mental sphere, the true abode of man, he assimilates the experiences of the two preceding states, and these are transmuted into characteristics and potentialities, which, combined with those obtained in former lives, must incarnate with him in a new body when the time has arrived. So man has three bodies, the physical, the astral, and the mental, which correspond with the three worlds, the physical, the astral, and the mental worlds, which we therefore may regard as the three bodies of the earth. It follows that man has already, in his earthly existence, a body for each of these three worlds. Thus, man, the ego, is many times born in a different physical body, with long intervals, during which on earth the conditions change continuously. Thus does he undergo many-sided experiences. The laws of karma and reincarnation rule our whole life. Without them, we cannot imagine a rational explanation of the different phases in our existence, nor answer the question why one is born in the deepest wretchedness, with a bad character, a sick body, in surroundings where any moral progress seems impossible, whereas another sees the light in luxurious surroundings, which offer him all opportunities to develop, while at the same time he enjoys a healthy body and an excellent character. Are there greater contrasts imaginable, and is there a reasonable explanation to be found without accepting the inexorable, but just law of cause and effect, and the law of reincarnation? But this is not the place to dwell at length on these things. For further study, I refer to works on theosophy. A few words, however, on these important points in question, I thought necessary. because, in my opinion, they are to a certain degree inseparable from astrology. In order to understand the one well, the other is necessary. They supplement one another. Astrology is the how of life, karma, the why. That concludes today's reading from Astrology, Its Technics and Ethics by CAQ, Libra. In this work, the author presents astrology not simply as superstition, but as a long-studied attempt to understand the relationship between human life and the rhythms of the cosmos. Whether one agrees with these ideas or approaches them with curiosity and skepticism, the book reminds us that throughout history, many philosophers, astronomers, and scholars sought meaning in the movements of the stars. As always, remember that these are the views of the author, and our goal here at the Library of Awakening is simply to explore and share these writings. We encourage everyone to continue researching, questioning, and forming their own understanding. If you enjoyed this reading, please support the Library of Awakening by giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing rare and fascinating books like this one. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep awakening.
Welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening. I know some of the perspectives that I share may be as challenging for you as they once were for me. But isn't that the beauty of exploration? Every perspective, no matter how unconventional, has something valuable to contribute to it if it's shared. Knowledge is not absolute. It's a living, breathing phenomena, shaped and reshaped over time. The important thing is not always be right, but to always be curious. Explore freely, share boldly, and learn deeply. And don't rely solely on others to validate your discoveries. Stand firm in integrity, even in the face of criticism. Remember that growth always means embracing the humility to admit when we're wrong. Learning from our errors is not a setback, it's the very essence of our progress. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening.